Welcome back to another episode of Coffee with the Critters, where I live stream every Sunday morning. It's usually at 9:30 a.m. Eastern, unless I have a guest. And today I have a guest on. I have the awesome Dr. Deb Jones, who is a returning guest. She's live streamed with me on numerous different topics several times before, right, Deb? Many times. Yeah, a lot of times she's sitting here at the center right next to me, but today she is joining me online. So before we get started with that, I just want to say welcome to everybody. And if you're new to the work that I do, my name is Laura Joseph, owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people all over the world how to empower animals and the people that care for them. And it sounds like I'm reading this, but I'm not. I have been Deb and I were just talking about how many years I've been live streaming Coffee with the Critters, and I would believe it's about 8 years. So we teach people how to empower animals, the people that care for them. We do that through our live streaming services, and you can find out more about that on our website. You can also reach me at Lara, Lara, at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. You can check our Facebook page, our website for upcoming events where we do in-person workshops, training by my side, working with numerous species of animals. I like to work with exotics to show people how you don't have to use force to train an animal. And that's going to bring us to our topic today of cooperative care. Uh, what I focus on is my specialty is in the science of behavior called applied behavior analysis. And I show people how to use this with animals to create a dialogue with them where they want to do the behaviors that we're asking and the behaviors that are needed, which brings me to my topic of cooperative care. So I did reach out to Deb Jones and asked her if she would come on for another live streamed episode of Coffee with the Critters. So Deb, you ready? I'm going to go ahead and bring you on. Okay, here she comes.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hey,
So,
Laura.
hey, Deb, good to see you again. We're going to have to get together again and train soon.
We are. I miss it. It's been a long time.
I know when you and I get together, we're just like,
So much fun. Yeah, that's what I said. We won't have any problem talking for an hour. Jeez, we will have problems stopping. That's
right,
what happens.
exactly.
Yeah.
So before we get started, Deb, I'm going to read your bio so people who may not be familiar with you are about to be.
Okay.
Okay. So I know a lot about you, but I know since you've retired as an assistant professor, correct,
Yes.
at Kent State. What was
Mhm.
that, about 2 years ago?
That's been like 5 years ago now already.
Has
Yeah.
it been that long?
I know, it's stunning to me, yes, it's been about 5 years, and it's gone fast, and I don't feel at all retired, but it is a little more relaxing than trying to work full-time and do animal training on the
Yeah.
side, so now I can really focus on what I want to do.
It's probably a little more relaxing because you're working more than you were before. You're
Mhm.
probably working more now because I see you online giving classes, doing whatever, but you can do it at your own pace and your own choice now.
E exactly,
Yeah,
exactly, and I can focus on the things that really matter to me and the things that I think are really important to focus on instead of kind of having my attention split sometimes, so it's good to be retired.
good. Okay, well, I'm going to read your updated bio because I'm sure
Okay.
it's changed in the last 5 years. Um, Deb Jones, PhD, is a retired psychology professor who now trains animals full time. She has been training for 30 plus years and focuses on positive reinforcement based methods. Deb has written 13 books on dog training and has helped develop several DVD series way back in the day. She has also trained and shown multiple breeds to high-level titles in agility, rally, and obedience. She is currently teaching online training classes, workshops, and webinars at Finzi Dog Sports Academy, and we'll put up links at the end of the live stream. Her
Mm.
latest project is Cooperative Care Certificate Program in partnership with Finzi Dog Sports Academy. So, did I miss anything?
Oh, there's probably a lot, but we'll cover some of it here or there. Yeah, lots of little things. I'm always coming up with new ideas of things that I wanna work on.
I know. And maybe we can come up with some new ideas of things that we can work on together.
I know, we love to collaborate on things.
I know
Excellent.
it's getting ready to get chilly, so that keeps us indoors, and I love working on the computer. So Deb,
Yeah.
um, we decided today, Deb focuses a lot on dogs, but definitely not limited to, because you still have cats at home?
No more cats. The cat's gone now, but
Mhm.
yeah. So I
Okay.
focus mainly on dogs, but with the caveat that the same principles apply to pretty much any species, but you have to know your species in order to train it, but learning is learning. Um, so yeah.
Learning is learning, and when we're working with an animal, no matter what the species, I always say it's training me too, and I'm completely fine with that. The training is a dialogue between the two of us, in understanding, and the animal needs to get to know us as well.
Yes, definitely. We used to think of it, especially with dogs, as you tell them what you want them to do and they do it. That's not really a dialogue. Okay? That's really common one-way communication. Do this thing because I said so, and even do this thing because I'll give you a cookie. But we didn't listen to anything they had to say back to us. And I think that's a big positive change that I'm seeing in dog training for sure right now, is that people are actually starting to be interested in what how the animal feels about being trained and the situations that we're putting them in and understanding how much that impacts how well and how quickly they can learn if we actually respect that they're trying to communicate back to us and we take their needs and wants and desires into account rather than just trying to impose our will on them and say, I want you to do these things. So I love seeing that evolution in dog training for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and, I have some photos I can show as we're talking about this topic,
Okay.
vast topic. I like to focus on exotics, because to back up the other amazing trainers out there like yourself, like this alligator is gonna be less resilient. You may be able to force it once. Um
I don't even know once is a good idea.
Hence the alligator on my hat. But so I like to work with animals that the exotics, for numerous different reasons to incorporate training through positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis into their daily enrichment. So studies show if you're actually using positive reinforcement training, it's the animal's preferred form of enrichment. I know that for a fact.
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. If they my I see it in my dogs all the time. They want to train. They want to work with me. And so to me, that's like, okay, that's the highlight of their day. That's the best part of their day is working with me, which is exactly what it should be, as opposed to me insisting that they work with me and do things that I want them to do. Um,
Yep. There's a difference between, which you just mentioned before, like one-way training where we don't we didn't ask, we just told the dog to do what to do and the dog did it. Boom. So
mhm.
what's the difference between command and cue? When people tell me they give their dog a command, I'll say, "Wait a minute, you know,
Yeah. Yeah,
what
it's
what does that mean?"
Yeah, the giving them a understanding that we want them to be a willing part of this training relationship, I think is really something important that, at least in the dog training world, people didn't think about a lot. It's like, we don't care what the dog how the dog feels or what the dog thinks, as long as they do what I told them to do. And now I see this evolution, and I think it's really clear in the cooperative care work I do, because we're trying to take feedback from the animal. We're trying to read what they're telling us just as much as we are trying to teach them something. So the idea that we can get that communication flow going and that we're listening to them. And when they say something is too scary or something is too difficult, we actually listen to that and react appropriately, rather than just pushing to get done whatever it is we want to do to them, or
Right.
we feel like we need to do to them in the moment, which almost always ruins the training relationship if we push too hard. And when we listen to them, it's kind of amazing how much they actually have to say.
Yeah, and I decided to put up this photo as we're talking because you're saying as we listen to them if they can vocalize.
Mm.
We can understand their behavior through accurately reading their behavior,
Yes, yes.
aka body language. But are we accurately reading it? This is a photo because we're working on this in the Parrot Project now, teaching an animal restraint.
Mhm.
So, Deb, should I read, or do we both want to give a description of exactly what cooperative care is as we
Yeah,
go into this?
yeah, that's probably a good idea if we actually describe what we're talking about. Like, 'cause
I'll
go ahead.
No, I'll read what I had written down when I was describing cooperative care, and if you wanna jump in, I have written down cooperative care with animals refers to a collaborative between us and the animal, to handling and caring for the animals, often in a domestic or managed care setting. The primary goal of cooperative care is to build trust, establish a positive relationship, and ensure the physical and emotional well being of the animal while reducing stress or eliminating it, preventing it from even being there, potential risk for both the animals and the caregivers. This approach is commonly used in various animal related fields. I mean, if you're not, it's almost to the training has evolved so much, even over the past 20 years since I've been into this, that if you are not doing positive reinforcement training or understanding the science of behavior, people are kind of looking at you like, why are you doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, we know that there's a better way than force and pressure, um, and coercion in order to accomplish things, the goals that we have with animals. And so, yeah, when we talk about cooperative care now, it's becoming a big thing in the dog world, which it never ever was before. I mean, it was just kind of assumed when a dog needs something done to them that they don't like, you restrain them and you do it. And that's all there is to it. There are no other options, and of course, what happens is over time, they get more and more resistant to being restrained if we and you mentioned teaching restraint, if we haven't taught them that restraint is a good thing, and so we can make it better. They're going to need veterinary care. They're going to need grooming. All animals are going to need things, and the longer they live, the more things they need. I've had enough old dogs now to tell you they need pretty much everything I've ever taught them in terms of care skills, because they have to take pills, they need injections, they have to wear a cone, they have all these things that are going to be necessary throughout their lifetime. And I don't want those things to be unpleasant for them. I don't want those things to constantly be a fight between us. So the idea of cooperation, in that I'm going to take the time up front to show you that it can be in your best interest to participate in these things and to let me do these things to you. And in fact, most of the time, 99% of the time, it's not scary and it's not painful. There may be that moment when something has to be done and we neither of us have a choice in the matter, but I can overcome that by all the positive experiences that I give them before we get to that point most of the time. Now sometimes things just happen again. We have those cases where it's going to be not cooperative. It's going to be, this is done to you and it has to be done. But then I need to fix that. I need to go back and work on that even harder if that turns out to be the case. So for me, cooperative care is all about preparing them long before they might need any of these procedures, and not assume that it'll never happen, or that they'll just be fine with it, because those things turn out not to be true at all. They're not fine with it. And we're starting to see it in the veterinary profession now too, that they're starting to understand, and people don't want their animals to be traumatized in order to get medical care. And they're starting to come up with a lot of techniques, and get on board with the idea that there's a lot that can be done that is not quite so unpleasant for animals. The idea that we just have to get it done and we have to get it done as fast as possible, that's usually not absolutely necessary. There's usually time to work on it.
Absolutely. You've brought up so many different good topics. And one was in the veterinary office. You can tell that they're used to animals coming in that aren't trained for
Oh,
this.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was like, Levi needs a nail trim or needs his ears checked out. And it's like they immediately go into force restraint mode. And I'm like, wait, this animal is trained for this. Please don't positively punish the training you've done to get the animal prepared for this.
Right.
What I'm showing with one of our wolves, Naomi, there, preparing it for, all I'm doing is preparing her for, I'm teaching her to line up perpendicular or parallel with the fencing to prepare for a veterinary exam.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
and you can do that, with the protected contact even. You don't have to, with dogs, we have it a lot easier because typically we can be in direct contact. Now, we do have some more extreme cases where that's dangerous, but in general, we've got a little more leeway when we're working with domestic animals than you do when you're working with animals that can hurt you pretty badly pretty quickly.
yeah. You made another, oh, you talked a little bit ago about if you have to use
Oh, yeah.
force.
Mhm.
So, and I will do the same thing. I mean, you and I are both on the same page with
Oh,
almost pretty, I
like
think,
1,000%, yeah,
yeah.
definitely, yeah.
But it's so important to get this animal prepared and trained for what you know has to happen, because if it's not trained for it, you're going to have to likely force it to do it. But there are those instances where we're like, whoops, this
Yeah,
happened before I can train it.
right.
So that those are instances where I will force the animal because the alternative of not doing it is worse. But like you said, note to self, start this training immediately. And
Yeah.
I've seen firsthand where an animal in my care is sick, and um, it's just like, thank God we have trained for this, because you have to deliver medication, you have to restrain, you have to weigh, and that, when an animal is sick, the sickness is itself is a stressor. So
Yes.
then if the animal's not trained for it and you have to force it for restraint, for toweling, whatever, that's adding all that much more stress that really doesn't need to be, or we could have prevented through
Right,
training.
exactly. We're doing them such a big favor by planning ahead and doing as much cooperative care work as we can before we need it. And then and it actually still helps even when we get in those situations that we haven't yet prepared for. Once we start to build that foundation, they trust us a little bit more, and they bounce back from one bad event or something unpleasant or uncomfortable, and we can still continue to make progress. We don't ruin all our progress,
Right.
even though we had to do something that was not choice for the animal. And I've had to do that with my own animals because things happen that, you never dreamed were going to happen. It's like, now we have to do this now, sorry. But since I've done all the groundwork that I put in with everything, it carries over. and you get that carryover effect to other stuff that you didn't even really think about, because it just and they get used to it. And what I always tell people is what I want my animals to think is that people do weird stuff to you. They grab you and they squeeze you and they push you and but it always pays off really well. So if they do weird stuff for me to me, great, it'll pay off. And so I want them to become very optimistic that when people are handling them, it typically is going to have a really good payoff for them in the long run. And once they believe that, then they're like they're like gamblers. They're like, this will work out. This will pay off big time because I'm
Yeah.
letting them do this thing now. And I've seen that over and over again. So people who say, well, I can't do cooperative care because they have to have eardrops right now. There are actually a lot of ways that you can still do what you have to do, yet protect the work that you've already done. You don't have to ruin that. So we can set up in a different context. If my animal has no choice, I don't pretend that they do. I actually have a cue that basically means we're doing this, and that is it. We're doing this now. Um, I put them in a different place than what we normally do our work. I use this different cue. I don't introduce food into situations where there is no choice, because that can actually make them suspicious of the food and then poison your attempts to do your positive reinforcement training. So I keep food out of the situation. I do the thing that needs to be done, and then I give them some time to decompress afterwards, before we go back into training sessions again. And how when we go back into training depends on what we had to do, how much time I feel like they need to kind of recover from that. And then we go back to some easy stuff and back to our normal training routine again. So it's possible to, with pretty much anything, to still protect your work and to continue on being successful. You just have to kind of nuance it a little bit and no, try to keep things as separate as you can between training and that unpleasant thing.
Yeah, you bringing that up, we were just talking about this the other day. What was it? Oh, in a workshop 2 weeks ago, somebody asked me, um, I was showing how to train birds to accept medication from a syringe.
Yeah.
And somebody said, "Can't you just add the medicine to the reinforcer?" And I said, "I don't know, you could try it." But
Mhm.
here's the downfall of doing that. We had, one of the lemurs in because it needed to be medicated, and I wanted it already knew how to accept medication, um, but somebody had asked, "Can't we just stick the medication in a banana?" I said, "You can try it,"
Yeah.
but the
Hmm.
downfall and they were like, "But this lemur really loves bananas." I said, "The downfall is without training the contingency that if medication, then banana, you're going to put the aversive into the positive reinforcer and you can actually positively punish the animal taking the banana and then you've got nothing."
Exactly. Now you don't have a good reinforcer anymore. And that is a commonly done thing because people think that you can just pair food with unpleasant things and it'll work. And we know that there's a system to the way that you have to do it. That there's like the science, there's scientifically, it only works if you do it in a specific order. And if you try to pair a strong aversive with a positive reinforcer, you are more likely to poison the positive reinforcer than you are to condition the aversive to be positive. So you have to be aware of what you're doing. People will tell me all the time, well, I'll feed the dog while I'm doing their nails or trying to do their nails. And now they won't take food anymore. And I'm like, huh, like I haven't heard this 1,000 times. Yes, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
And they're telling you, and they're actually now they're telling you something by not being able to take food. They're giving you really important information that you have put them in a situation that is way too much for them to handle. And now you're ruining your reinforcers. Uh-oh. My phone is talking to me now. Sorry about that. Let me just, Siri wants to know what I'm saying. Sorry. Stop talking to me.
And one thing you saying that reminded me of a video that was going around on social media I don't know, let's just say 5 years ago, where people were putting the saran wrap around their head and
I
then
hate
putting the peanut butter on it. I saw
people.
that and I was like, oh,
People have sent me that video over and over again, and every time somebody puts it in my Cooperative Care Facebook group, I explain why this is such a horrendous idea. I mean, the safety factors alone. People don't think with dogs about the safety, and you wanna encourage your dog to be right in your face while you're doing something that is potentially painful and uncomfortable to them. What do you think the possible outcomes are of this? They're not good. There's nothing
no.
good, and now you're gonna have a much bigger problem. It's just a stupid, stupid thing,
And
and
you're going to have a much bigger problem, and the one that's going to pay for it is the dog.
right, right. You might get the bite, but the dog is certainly going to be the one that suffers more
The
when all
dog's
is
going
said
to
and
suffer
done.
from your stupid
Yeah. Well,
stupidity.
and this was recently shared, from a vet clinic. And, I just can't even imagine the thought process that this is a good idea, and this I think the whole idea is, "Well, see, we can find a way to get this done by distracting the dog with food." Again, back to the idea that you could poison that, but you're adding this element of danger to the person doing this that is totally unnecessary, and so you're just making a mess of it because people don't quite understand how to go about actually desensitizing the dog to unpleasant things or the animal to unpleasant things, and that there's a process that you need to go through, and if you do it wrong or incorrectly, then you're not going to get the results you want, and in fact, you might have the opposite results.
Yeah.
So, trying to pair 2 things, is not gonna work. Putting them together at the same time typically is not going to work. We do the thing, then we reinforce it.
And a
Right.
lot of times if people try that, if they're being advised to do this by somebody that doesn't specialize in behavior, the science of behavior, positive reinforcement, they're going to do it incorrectly, not
Mhm.
being set up for success in the beginning, and then say, I've tried it, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work. It doesn't work, and when we know that's just execution. It works. The laws of learning work. As though, it's like saying gravity doesn't work. It's like, yeah, it does. And so does learning. Learning
Gravity.
works. Yeah. It's like this does work. These are universal laws, but you have to know how to apply them properly for the particular subject that you're working with, whatever species it might be or whatever individual in a species it might be. So there's ways we have to tweak things, but then there are some things that just are. And, this whole idea that food will override anything is not true. Not true at all, and in fact, it can cause more problems than it fixes. I use food all the time, but I use it very thoughtfully, and I use it to, not only to teach my animals what I want them to do, but a lot of time in cooperative care, I want them to do absolutely nothing but hold still. That's like the biggest thing that we want in cooperative care. When I asked my vet 10 years ago, if there was one thing you could get dogs to do when they come in to visit you, what would it be? I was kind of surprised when she said, hold still. But it makes a lot of sense. If you're willing to hold still and let me do things to you, if you're willing to hold still and be relaxed and calm and let me do things to you, then everything's going to be easier. And so to me, that became one of the kind of the foundations of what I want to do is I want to teach animals that you can hold still and I will actually pay you just for that. 'Cause this is really like a foreign concept to a lot of dogs and a lot of dog trainers. Dog training with positive reinforcement has become very active, and a lot of focus is on the dog offering behaviors, and in cooperative care, I want just the opposite. I don't want you to offer me anything except being still and waiting for me to do whatever weird thing I'm gonna do to you. So it's a shift that is a little confusing for some trainers and for some dogs, because you remember Zen, my
Mhm.
dog Zen, he was not a still dog. He was a, "Let me do this. How about this? What if I try that? Oh, you want me to do that?" And he could do 50 things while I'm still thinking about what I wanted. Um, and teaching him to be still was a real challenge, but he needed it. He had, towards the end of his life, he had a heart condition where he needed lots of treatment, and luckily, he could go in and get his echocardiogram. Just they tell him what to do and he'd do it, and they were like amazed. In fact, he would jump up on the table by himself so that he could do the thing. But teaching him to then just hold still while they do something to you was probably the most valuable thing I ever taught him. And I think it's important for us to think about that. And I use food to really cement that concept that being still pays off.
Yep.
Just holding still.
Well, the reason I pulled up this photo when you were talking about being still is
Mhm.
teaching a parrot for voluntary nail trim, because a lot of times, I mean, because while you're sitting there saying, how do we need to teach an animal to be still, I guarantee you at least one person watching that is like, what is what is that? What do you mean? How do you do it? How do you
Right.
describe it? How do you break
It's
that down into observable,
Mhm.
measurable terms? When I am training a parrot for a voluntary nail trim, when I'm starting to train, I don't even start with the Dremel. It's not even in the equation. I got to teach a foot target. I'll teach a head target to teach the animal, this is where I want your head while I'm working down here on your feet in front of you. So and people will tend to ask for too much behavior and not breaking it down and assuming that the animal knows what you're wanting it to do. But when I'm training an animal or a parrot for a nail trim, what does that look like? It looks like head up here, foot out in front here. And a lot of times what they'll do when you first bring the Dremel out is they will reach like this. So how are you going to trim their nails? You train them to be still.
Mhm, and that's not an easy task. It is it's harder than people think. It's harder to be still for most animals than it is to move, especially if we're doing something or moving something around or touching them in some way, or then starting to approach them with a tool. It's a very hard thing for them to learn that being still is the thing that pays off. But it's possible. It's definitely possible. In dogs, we work a lot on different positions that we want them to be in. You talk about targeting, and targeting is definitely a way to get an animal to be still and hold, whatever that target is. We use a chin rest where you hold your chin in the palm of my hand. And just once we get that, it's like the rest of the body follows with stillness. If I can get the head still, the rest of the animal also becomes still. And that gives us a great tool to use for different procedures like eye drops and ear drops and checking the teeth and doing all those things, because once I get your head still, and we end up usually with a pillow in my lap and the dog's head on the pillow, teaching them that that's their target and to hold that kind of a chin rest. We also work on different positions, like lie on your side with your head down, um, or just standing. Standing is like the hardest one because there's too many options when you're just standing. If you're laying down with your head down, it's pretty clear that you're being still. And a couple of our dogs now, if they want something from us, they'll walk in front of us and plop down on their side with their head down, like, hey. And then they'll look up and put the head back down. It's like it's become a way for them to ask for things. And the chin rest is also, it's like their way of starting a communication now. They're going, hey, when we do this, usually you do something for me. So we're starting to give them a means to go, okay, I do this. It means I'm okay with what you're doing. And if they can't do it, if they can't hold the chin rest, if they can't lie on their side, that tells me I'm too uncomfortable with what you're doing. And so that tells me, go back, break it down a little further into those parts that you're talking about, make it easier, help them be more successful. I want all my training based on success. I want to go from success to success. So I need to make it easy enough that that's possible. If my dog is not successful at what I'm trying to get them to do, um, in 2 repetitions, I know that I need to change my approach because it's not gonna get better if I keep pushing harder. We never learn when we're over our heads, and that's what they're telling us. If they're not getting it, if they're not capable of it, stop doing it. Go back a few steps. So if I reach out to touch my dog and they move away, okay, they can't do that. That's too much. So what if I just hold up my hand? Usually that's doable, and I can start to reinforce that. And then I can move my hand slightly, and then more, and then a little more. But people want to start with like grabbing the dog's foot and picking it up. It's
Yeah.
like, that's the end of a long series of little teeny behaviors. And people really don't know, they don't see all the precursor behaviors to lead to the goal. And I think that's one thing you and I both do is to go, okay, here's what we want, but that's way down the line. Where can I get my foot in the door to start training that and to start moving towards that? And what I start with doesn't look anything like what I'm going to end with.
Yeah.
But I need that. And I need to be happy to go back to that if we run into roadblocks and pitfalls.
So where you start doesn't look anything like where it's going to end, but I understand completely what you're saying. And what we're doing along the way is teaching that animal information that's going to set them up for the success that they're going to understand completely at the end of that very long training sentence.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes, and people, I should say, sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it doesn't. If you do your breakdowns well, it can go pretty darn fast. But fast is never my goal with training because fast leads to too many mistakes, leads to taking shortcuts and pushing too hard. And my goal is always, okay, reading that again, paying attention to their body language, the small things that tell me that what I'm doing is okay with them or what I'm doing is too much. Even like leaning back slightly, you know, um, stiffness in the muscles, which you really have to know an animal to know that, and to be able to see that. I mean, the big obvious thing is they leave, and I always give them the option to leave. That's clear to me. If my training is so bad that you need to leave, I need to really have a talk with myself before we come back and try this again. But it's obvious. It's clear. And that's I'm like, I give them cookies for that. If you leave, I'm going to give you cookies because you're telling me, you're communicating with me in the way that you can that this is too much. So I want to respect that and let you know that's fine. That's fine that you leave. When you come back, I will check myself and make sure that you can be successful. That's my job. You can be successful as we move forward in the process. And so I will change what I'm doing. There's always a way to break something down further. Always. I've not yet run into the case where there's not.
The reason I brought this photo back up because if Rico wants to leave, he's just going to flap his wings and be gone.
Mhm.
And Deb, if we push the animal to that point, if they leave, that's information to us. Whoa, I missed those signals that I was pushing the animal too far. And what's really important is we make mistakes too. And the more we tell people, when I make a mistake, I just make sure I learn from it. That animal just flew away.
Mhm.
What did it do right before it flew away? Because that's what I'm going to need to look for the next time.
Right, right.
Because that's
It
a cue to me that you're pushing me too far.
Yes, if we're ignoring all that and only paying attention to getting them to do what we want, we're not gonna be successful in this whole endeavor, because they're going to become more resistant over time. They're gonna have to be louder to let us know that they don't like what we're doing. I want them to just tell me very softly that this is a little bit of a problem, so I can back off and I can fix that approach and I can make it easier for them. It's never their responsibility to learn, but it's my responsibility to teach them. And if they're not getting it, it's all my fault. It's never, ever their fault that they're not getting it because who's the one who knows what the goal is? I mean, I'm the only one who knows. And so I have to be able to find a way to communicate with a species that doesn't speak English or doesn't understand English very well. They understand little bits and pieces here and there, but we can't just have a conversation verbally. But we can have a conversation where we're paying close attention to each other and where I'm trying to pick up on all the cues that they can give me, whether they're comfortable or not. And if they're not comfortable, it doesn't matter what else happens. They have to be comfortable with the process. So I always want to go back to that and work to make sure that we've built up that comfort level and that trust that I'm not going to do anything, that's going to be horrible. But I'm going to work you up to things. I'm going to work up to things that you probably wouldn't like if I just went in and tried to do. I'm like, I want to restrain my dog. I'm gonna, you talk about using a towel. I'm gonna wrap my arms around my dog and hold them still if my dog is safe to do that with. And the first time you do that, most dogs are gonna be like, oh, I don't think so. And they're gonna struggle. And that's not good. We've taught them that somebody grabs you, somebody came up and grabbed me. I would not take that well. I would struggle with that. But if a friend comes up and hugs me, that's a whole different thing. So we
Mhm.
want it to feel much more like a hug than an assault. I don't even when we're restraining them. But we can teach them that most restraint is really good. Just hold still. It's like letting your grandmother hug you. Okay, fine.
Right.
It'll
Deb
end soon and everything will be okay, and she'll give me candy or something, so it'll be
right,
fine.
right. For more money for Christmas.
Exactly. So we want them to allow these things. We don't want to just insist that it happens, but we want them to go, fine, it's worth it. It pays off. And I trust this person enough to know that they're not going to hurt me. And then when I take them into situations with other people, they're trusting that I'm not putting them into a situation they can't manage. And usually their skills come through pretty well, which is kind of amazing. Again, that carryover effect seems to happen. But you have to trust somebody first. They have to trust the trainer first
Yeah.
before they can possibly trust anybody else.
I mean, Skinner once said that the most common form of um, control today is force, through
Oh,
force.
oh,
And
sure.
it doesn't need to be. And if we just look at it like if we're trying to do something to an animal and we're struggling because the animal is not behaving in the way that we want it to,
Right.
look at it and say, how would I feel if this was happening to me by a bunch of people speaking Japanese?
Right, exactly. You, it, much of what we do is probably mystifying and terrifying to animals. They have no idea. And I talk about, being at the dentist, which most people don't like. But my dentist now, she always says to me, if you need me to stop, raise your left hand and I'll stop. And so, yeah, and I actually, of course,
I'd
tested
be
it
in there like
out
this, ready
because
to be
I
hit.
wanted to make sure that it actually would work. So, of course, I did, and she stopped, and I'm like, "Okay, never mind, go on." But I think
Because you
we need our animals to do the same thing. We want them to know if they need us to stop and it's at all possible, we will stop. If this is too hard right now, if this is scaring you, I won't try to make you push through it. I will actually go, okay, let's take a break. Here, go, have some cookies. Let's go play. Let's go just relax a little while. We'll come back later and try it again, unless it's absolutely necessary.
I like that example a lot because she gave you information, you tested it to see if you
Uh,
had choice and control in the situation. And
yes.
if she didn't stop when you raised your left hand, what I mean,
Yeah,
this
what would I then that would ruin the whole thing. Yeah, that would
you're
ruin
not
the
gonna
whole
trust her.
relationship.
It's gonna teach you, no, you do not have control. You don't have a
Mhm.
choice, and it's probably gonna raise your blood pressure. It's probably gonna cause unnecessary stress, and all of that doesn't need to be, and you just tested it, and you're probably like, "Good to go."
Exactly. Now I'm like, I will see this dentist forever, because yeah, I trust what she says, and I want my animals to feel the same way. That if they feel the need to stop, I will be paying attention to that, and I will let them stop something if it's at all possible. And that's why I say I like to keep what I have to do separate from these are our training sessions, and we're working up to things, because there will be times when we might have to break that trust. But I don't, lots of people use that as an excuse for not doing any of the training. It's like, well, I just had to do it. And it's like, well, that's fine. You just had to get their nails done, but you don't have to just get their nails done every week for the, it's going to happen for the rest of their lives. So what are you doing to prepare for that as you move forward? You can't just say, okay, because it's required, because it's necessary, I don't have to train for it. It's like, no, you train even harder for it because it is going to be necessary forever. So it's not an excuse, but we need to get through what we have to do. So, and we need to keep working on all the ways we can make it more pleasant for them. And there's so much. I mean, there are just so many ways we can make it better. Um, but there's the big problem is, and I think you would agree here, is people don't know where to start. And they just like, it's like, we know, again, I'm always working backwards. I'm always thinking backwards from here's where we need to be. Where do I need to go from here to here to here? Let's go back all these steps. And where's the first step? Sometimes that is incredibly hard to figure out if you haven't done it a lot and you're not used to the process. And for me, with dogs anyway, my first step, this is more for the person as well, but it's for the dog, is set up a place where you're going to do your training. Have a dedicated space where you're going to do your work. And that, believe it or not, is often the hardest part for people because it takes them forever to figure out how to make it work. And the place has to be somewhere, that's comfortable. It has to be stable. It has to be big enough. It has to be a place where the animal can come and go at will. So if you're using a grooming table, which I do use because I'm not getting on the floor bending over anymore in my life, any more than I have to. So the animal comes to me. And then I have it set up so they can jump from the table to the chair to the ottoman to the floor so they can get on and off by themselves. And even small animals, you can set up something like that. But it's like, okay, first have this dedicated spot, just do that. And that takes people a while to figure out what's going to work for them and also what's going to work for the animal. Now, where they're comfortable. If you have a giant breed dog, you're probably going to need something different than if you have a toy dog. You have a lot more options as to how you might set up a space to train, a particular place. But I go way back to that. And then, thinking about, okay, how am I going to feed them? How am I going to reinforce them? And how am I going to actually physically provide the reinforcer? So we go through a whole process of it comes to you because I want you to be still. And so if I want you to be still, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to bring the food to you. When I release them or they need a break, then I'll throw the food so they can chase it. And then they can come back and I feed you, which encourages the stillness that I want. But I don't just insist on stillness. I know they need to move as well. So I'm thinking back to all those steps before I even get to the point where we touch a dog at all or put a hand on an animal at all. I'm thinking, way back to what reinforcers we have, how are we going to provide them? I teach them that, we're going to have what I call a Zen bowl, which is a bowl with food in it that I actually keep out and they can focus on that bowl. And then I take the food and reinforce out of it. But I have to teach them, first of all, that you don't just take the food out of the bowl yourself. There's this process of me teaching them that if you wait, it will come to you. And if you try to go to it, it'll go away. We play these little Zen games to teach them that. And that becomes very valuable in giving them a focal point while I'm working on them and working with them. And all that comes, before I start like actually getting the point where we're touching them. So when somebody comes to me and says, I need to do my dog's nails, which is the absolute number one thing that people need to do or want to do. It's like, okay, where are you going to be doing their nails? What's the place that you want to use? What's the reinforcer? What food are you going to use? How are you going to give it to them? Let's get all that in order. Now, okay, can you touch your dog? And people will be like, yeah, I pet my dog all the time. And petting and handling are two very different things, and your dog knows. The dog knows when you're petting them, and they're very aware of when this is like serious business and you're about to do something to them. They are quite clear on the difference between those things. So just because you can pet them and they enjoy it, which I hope they do because they should, that doesn't mean that you can grab their foot and start cutting their nails. So we have to go again back through, can I touch all the different body parts? Can I hold them, squeeze them, restrain them? I like to get all that in as soon as I can before I think much about adding the tools. and going to the Dremel. I use a Dremel all the time now, but clippers, files, whatever people are going to use for nails, we have to introduce the tools, get them comfortable with that. So it's not going to happen in a day or a week or a month even. It's going to be it's a lifelong process. It's never done. I'm always maintaining it or trying to strengthen something. So it's not like you can ever say I'm finished and stop working on it.
Yep. And here is probably, I don't want to say one of the most important things.
Mhm.
It's something that had a big impact on me when I heard it, and I spout it out all the time. If I am training a wolf's nails, like, which is what I'm thinking about, I'm
I love
preparing the
that
wolf
picture.
to
That's a
do
great picture.
their, and when they jump on the side of the fence,
Mhm.
um, I just tell the other trainers, I'd rather don't touch them, because attention is a reinforcer.
Oh, sure.
Touching is a reinforcer for them. So when you cue them to jump, then reinforce. When they jump on their own, do not deliver reinforcement, because my goal is to get in and work with them, which I did for the first time yesterday. And I wouldn't go in because I didn't know them. I didn't understand them enough to go in with them to see if, is that going to be too high arousal? Is there going to be resource guarding? Because resource guarding is huge with them. And if I've associated all the positives with them through the fence, I wasn't sure how I'm going to get in, because I don't know how this pack is going to react once this big, valuable, positive reinforcer is now sitting inside your enclosure.
Yeah.
So we taught them to station. But I was going somewhere else with that. But anyway, I ended up getting in with them for the first time yesterday, and it was beautiful. Smooth chocolate silk
Ugh.
flowing down a river.
That sounds amazing. It's like when that happens, people don't know how that feels unless you've been in that situation where you put in all the groundwork and it actually turns out just like you hoped it would. That's an amazing event, yeah, when that happens, and I never take that for granted. Yeah.
Yeah. So because I was worried, because they have a history of jumping on the fence when
Mhm.
keepers come up, and I'm like, do not don't ever deliver a
Yes.
reinforcer for that.
Yeah.
Um, but I wanted to show this as well, because you were talking about that's gonna. I always start in the back. That's gonna come later. So with this particular, there's a lot that I had to do to get to this point.
Mhm.
This wolf is in there with three other wolves, and when they get excited and they get aroused, they all run to you, and then they're jumping on each other, and then there's fights. So teach a station, reinforce for stationing at a distance. And what I'm actually preparing her for is rectal temperature taking.
Fun.
Um, so, but
It's doable. Yeah. Yeah.
there's a series of behaviors I have had to teach,
Mhm.
because if I'm using in the beginning with her, I found a second very highly valuable reinforcer, but I want her to stay parallel with the fence so I can take her temperature.
Mhm.
Um, I touched her tail and then went poof down like that. And I was like, all right, we'll
Mhm.
work on some other things first. But say I'm using food as a reinforcer here. And I did struggle with this in the very beginning. I was like, because once I said the word good, look where her head is.
Yeah.
When I said the word good, boom, it
Mhm.
turned around. And if her head turned around, her whole body is now out of position.
Yes.
So I'm moving too far, go back up to the shoulders, target
Mhm.
her nose where I want her, and then I delivered the food where I want her mouth to stay, which is
Yes.
that direction.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I don't think it'd work in your exact situation, but with the Zen bowl with dogs, it works so well because they are focused on the bowl in front of them, and so I can move around behind them and do around the body and do different things, and they're still looking at the food because food. But they're not taking it because I've taught them that you wait until I mark. Then I go get the food, give it to you, then I go back and do the thing. So getting them to focus where you want, your idea of targeting them, that's basically what kind of my place where I train is. I'm targeting them, go to this place. This is where we're going to do our work with positive reinforcement. And it should be such a great place that can't wait to be there. And in fact, there's almost always a dog on my grooming table napping, because if you're there, maybe something good will happen for you at some point.
Behavior doesn't lie.
No, not at all. No, we can, and that goes back to classical conditioning. We've made the space so positive that you want to be there. And they don't even know why they want to be there, but they just know it's really good, so they keep going back to it. So I think that's, you have different challenges in working with multiple animals, and in working with animals that you're being in direct contact with them. You have to be so much more thoughtful and so much more careful than I do with my dogs around my house. So your job is definitely more challenging, but also more interesting, because you have to come up with new ways of doing things. You have to be able to get creative. And it's like, once you understand how learning works, then you can get creative with it. But you can't be creative until you understand it. Otherwise, you're just, throwing stuff out there that's not going to really fly, and it's not going to land well. But that's interesting. I spent, many years expressing Star's anal glands, talking about rectal temperatures. So I'm very familiar with having to work at the back end of the dog. I wish my watch would quit talking to me. That would be nice. It keeps thinking I'm talking to it. So yeah, working at the back end of an animal has its own set of challenges for sure, but it's a fun thing to do. It's a really interesting thing to do.
I know we're coming up on an hour, Deb, and it doesn't even seem like we've
It
been
just
talking
keeps
for a half.
happening. I know. Every time we get together, we have this happen that
I
we
know.
don't. Yeah, we could go on all day.
Um, I do want to show this because it was so reinforcing to me to see what happens with training
Mm,
is when you think you may lose an animal.
mm,
Um, and that you can't tell me, if you're using positive reinforcement and applied behavior analysis, that you don't care for that animal in front of you. Because even if you think, I have no history with this animal, yeah, I'm not even thinking about emotions or caring or trying to build a relationship. All I need is this animal to do this so I don't have to force it to do it.
mhm.
Um, I have entered situations where I've been asked to train a certain animal and I'm like, ugh. And it's usually because I don't have enough information about that animal. But what happens is when you start training that animal, you start collecting information. And just like the animal, I always say fear means you don't have enough information. And you can gather that information through training. And I wanted to say, I don't know if you hear this at all. I hear it a lot more than I want to hear it. And it's when I'm training a bird or an alligator and somebody says, "Why would you need to train a bird or an alligator?" And I just look at them like they have 5 heads. And so I'm like, well, I guess if I didn't train these animals, I might say, "What would you train a bird or an alligator?" But we talked about, Elvis and Priscilla.
Mhm.
Um, and Priscilla got in an accident where we were wondering if she was gonna keep her leg or not.
Oh.
We found out that she did not have any broken bones, and the vet that saw her, I was just like, "I love you." He just turned and said, "This animal's leg is not broken. Have Laura do physical therapy through training." And that's exactly what I started doing. So this leg was very lame, and she would walk with just 3 legs, and this one would drag. So When you ask me, what can you train? Why would you need to train an alligator? I'm going to say, well, if it's in managed care, why wouldn't you? So through a simple nose target, I taught her, you can see she's starting to use that front left leg, but it's not
Mhm.
fully extended yet. And through a summer of training, she's walking like you would have no idea there was anything wrong with her leg. And if you ask me why I train animals, that's exactly.
Yeah, that's really amazing. We never know what we're gonna need, what they're gonna need from us, and we can make things so much better for them if we put in that groundwork, if we put in that effort. If you did you ever think someday you'd say, "Yeah, I was doing physical therapy with an alligator." Sure. It's like, that's perfectly normal. People do that kind of stuff all the time.
I know, and I never really, I mean, to me, I'm just like, yeah, train an
Mhm.
alligator, physical
Yeah.
therapy, but when you're outside of your group of talking, people are like, "Said nobody ever in my life."
Right, exactly, exactly. It's a foreign concept, I think, still. The one last thing I would say is something that comes up for me more often than I would want is we're gonna have, our pets, that age and eventually die. We're going to have I've had to euthanize many animals over the years, for physical and mental reasons, and if you've done cooperative care work, that last interaction that they have, especially if you have to go to the vet, it's so much better. If they're comfortable with all the procedures and you've done your work so that it's not a terrible thing going to the vet. It's not a terrible thing getting a shot. They're used to people doing, different kinds of things to them already. You can make that last thing you do to them so much better for them. And to me, it's like that might be worth a whole lifetime worth of training, just for the
Um,
fact that
Hang on, Deb, you cut out. Are you there?
they're not and
It,
euthanasia. So
can you hear me, Deb? Um, am I having
the
issues?
last thing for me is being able to give fullness at the end. I can hear you, but
I don't know if this is on my end or your
uh,
end.
fading in and out.
Okay. Um,
I'm not sure because you're kind of I hear myself, so I can't tell. But I can hear you now, but
okay.
yeah, it keeps breaking up. So maybe it's telling us we should, be done.
That it's time to end. Um,
I guess the internet gods are telling us that we've talked long enough.
if for some reason everybody's saying they can hear me just fine, but it's your end, Deb. So if for some reason you cut out
Okay,
before we end, I want to post the links of how people can get in touch with you.
okay, okay.
Okay. So, but with
It's
that being,
me.
yeah.
Apparently everybody agrees it's me. Yeah,
Um,
oops.
do you want to tell people how they can get in touch with you? How can they can follow your work?
Okay, hopefully they can hear me.
Hear you.
I I have a website, K9 letter K number 9 infocus.com. Thank you very much. And so there's where you can kind of see an overview of what I've got going on. If you're on Facebook, which I kind of guess you are, if you're watching, I have a group called Cooperative Care with Deb Jones that everybody is
You
very
didn't
free
give
to
me that link.
join. Please. Huh? Oh, I didn't.
No.
Well, search. You can search it. It's easy. It comes up for people real easily. So we have a big group that does lots of support, lots of advice, lots of problem solving. That's one to look for. I've got back at the website, if you look under books and DVDs, I've got some ebooks out. One of them is free. Yeah, that's it. One of them is free. It's called First Things First, and it's like the initial steps before you want to do cooperative care. Where do you start? That's a free ebook. There's another ebook that is the newest one on doing your dog's nails, which is huge, and it's 80 some plus pages on all the steps that I know to get your dog's nails done. And then the book that has been out for a while, Cooperative Care: 7 Steps to Stress-Free Husbandry, leads people through all those initial phases to get to doing the things, the procedures that you want to do with your dog. So I'd say you can find me there. I teach at Fenzi Dog Sports Academy online. So you can check there and look me up there. I'm not teaching anything again until I'm doing a webinar in January and a class in February. So taking a little end of the year break here and starting fresh at the beginning of the year again. But you can check out the offerings there. Most of what I do now is based in some sort of cooperative care, kind of stuff. That seems to have become my focus lately, but that could change at any moment.
Well, good. It sounds like you have a lot going on.
Always.
Yeah, not surprising at all. So I want to say thank you for coming on, Deb. I appreciate you. It's good seeing you.
I love talking to you.
It's good seeing you,
Yes.
even though it's on the computer. If I'm ever down your way, I will shoot you a message. When you're up this way, yell at me, let me know.
Excellent. We definitely need to get together again. It's been way too long. Time just keeps getting away from us.
It
But
flies.
thank you for asking me to,
You're welcome. So
thanks everybody for here.
yeah, I was going to say, for anybody that wants to look at the work that I do, feel free to take a look at our website, theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. We're already scheduling our workshops for next year. Some of them are already up. We haven't announced them yet, that they're there, but they are. You can also train by my side for a day, 2, 3 for a day with the trainer. I also have our online learning platforms, memberships, the foundations of animal training and behavior, and advanced applied animal training and behavior. We also have species specific, such as parrots. We have our webinars online. I will be having another webinar yet this winter. It's one of the reasons why I love winter, is I have downtime and time to work on the webinars. One last thing, our nonprofit, the Sam I Can Foundation, next Saturday. This is not an open invitation. What it is for, this is our nonprofit organization, the Sam I Can Foundation. We're having an open interview process. So for people who are local and would like to volunteer helping enrich the lives of some of the animals that come in through the Sam I Can Foundation and more, feel free. Do not just show up. You have to email me first and get registered for it, and we will get in touch with you, and you can do that by Laura at Sam I Can Foundation. So with that, I want to say thank you for everybody, especially Deb.
Happy to be here. Always happy to talk to you anytime.
Okay. Let me know if there's ever anything I can do for you, Deb.
Oh, you bet. I won't forget that. Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Laura.
All right. Thanks, Deb. See you, everybody.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here.